We're going to continue with our discussion about social media strategy, and I'm going to give you a step-by-step guide on how we'll go about creating a social media strategy now. So this is the process. The first thing that you're going to do is set clear goals, right? Make sure that you know who your audience actually is. That's step 2. Step 3 is to choose the platforms that you're going to use to engage with the audience. Step 4 is make sure that you know what your competitors are up to so that you can find alternative ideas to basically boost your own engagement. 5 is to develop the actual content that you're gonna use for your social media. And step 6 is going to be to use and create a calendar is going to enable you to distribute that content appropriately. Step 7 is going to be to decide who's going to be doing what and set a budget for the whole process. And step 8 is to look at metrics and have an implementation plan and monitor to see if you are meeting your goals or not. Now what we're going to do is I'm going to walk you through each of these steps in a little bit more detail. So the first step is to set clear goals. Like we have already mentioned in other videos, setting a clear goal is absolutely essential, right? And to do this, there are a couple of things that you should consider. Given that you're trying to do marketing, I think it's smart to map your goals to the customer journey so that you actually understand how the different activities that the customers are engaging in or potential customers are going to dictate to a large degree what it is that you're trying to achieve, right? And what the customer journey says is essentially that people go through different stages when it comes down to making a purchase, right? In the beginning, you're going to be focusing basically on the problem, right? You realize that there is either a problem or an opportunity, right? Then after that, you're going to do some research to solve that problem or maybe take care of that opportunity, right? Then you're going to make a smaller set of options that you consider acceptable and that you are thinking about maybe using to solve that problem that you have. And then you're going to make a purchase. And then you might have some post-purchase behavior. Like, for example, you're going to have uh, people coming back again. That will be loyalty, right? You might also have people becoming advocates for your brand, where they go out of their way to basically share with maybe a social media community and how good of a job you're doing with certain aspects of the brand, the product, etc. Now, if we understand this process or this journey, then we can actually realize, hopefully, that the kind of objectives that you're going to have when most of the people are in a certain stage, it's going to be different, right? So early on the process, for example, awareness is very important, right? If people don't know that your brand is in the marketplace, there is no way they're going to buy it, right? So awareness is a very basic threshold that you need to cover, which is essential for new companies, right? If you're a well-established company, maybe spending your effort in awareness is not smart. Like Coke, for example, if you do some sort of awareness metric, you're going to find that 95% of the people know about Coke, maybe higher than that. Like getting that extra 5%, it's really not necessary for Coke. On the other hand, because there are other drinks that are available in the marketplace, maybe working on conversion or working on advocacy is going to be more important for a brand that is already established. So pick your goals wisely. Now, once that you pick the goal that you're trying to achieve, you need to make sure that the goal is expressed in a way that actually is going to be conducive for you to do better. And for that, you need to use the characteristics of the goal that you have here on the slide. One is it needs to be specific. What that really means is that A, you need to decide on a metric associated with the goal. How are you going to measure it? And then you need to set a clear standard or bar of what it is that you're trying to achieve. So if you say you want to increase awareness, first you need to tell me, are you going to use unaided or aided awareness? There are at least two different ways of measuring this, right? So if you do a customer survey, you can ask people, hey, when it comes down to soda, why don't you list all the brands of soda companies that you know, and they will list brands. Hopefully Coke is there if you are Coke, right? And that will be unaided awareness. Another way of measuring this will be aided awareness, where you get a list of all the brands that sell soda and let people check the ones that they have heard of. Okay, obviously different thresholds of difficulty, if we're honest, right? So you first decide on the metric, and after you have decided whichever one it is, I don't care, it doesn't matter, then you need to decide how much awareness you want to increase, right? So if it is right now at 80%, maybe you want to get it to 85%, right? 5% increase. That will be specific. Okay. Then it needs to be attainable. I mean, increasing your awareness by the 5% when you are in the 80s might actually be challenging. On the other hand, if you're a new brand and nobody knows you, so if you do an unaided awareness, you get about a 0%, right? And maybe moving to 5, 10% is actually a lot more doable, right? Because uh, you're starting from such a low level that actually moving up 5% might actually be easier to attain. Okay, and then finally, a very important aspect is how long it's going to take you to achieve the goal, right? So if you tell me that you need to increase awareness by 5% using this metric, okay, that's great. But if you don't say when it's going to happen, well, then we can wait until the end of time and you'll still be okay, right? So to be honest with yourself, think about what is achievable and reasonable in the time frame that you're interested in working. You should have plans and goals that are short term, medium term, and probably long term as well. Okay, and obviously the time frame should vary according to that. Good. Once that you have your goal or goals, you can have more than one, but maybe one, two, maybe three. More than three is probably a wish list. Okay, so concentrate on one or two things, right? But once that you have decided what those are and how you're going to measure them and see if you're getting in that direction, right? And what you need to do is you need to make sure that you understand who your target market is, right? Understand your audience, right? So who are they, right? If you're an established company, you probably know this already. You've done maybe segmentation studies in the past, and then you already can maybe dust off some of those segmentation studies and look at what you found, right? If they are too old, maybe it might require some more data collection, right? On the other hand, the kind of questions that we're interested in is basically who your ideal customer is right now, especially if you're a new firm. Think about it in these terms, right? So think about it from the profile perspective. Who are they? What demographics do you have? Now, demographics are typically weak predictors of preferences, but they are important because they will enable you to identify these people, right? So make sure that you think in this regard. Things like age, gender, obviously, and maybe education, etc. Right? What else? Psychographics, very, very, very useful, right? These relate to what they do, basically, right? What kind of activities do they engage in a regular basis, right? Very different. Somebody who's a couch potato, right? That sits watching TV or playing video games all day, and somebody who, you know, really likes outdoors activities, right? The kind of products they're going to buy, the kind of brands they're going to endorse, very different, right? What are their interests, right? Where do they consume their media, right? I mean, what kind of channels do they frequent, right? That is very important because we're going to try to select those channels and platforms next, right? Good. And then finally, where are they, right? Geography, especially if you have a brick and mortar store or some sort of establishment that has a physical location, geography then it becomes paramount. But even if you don't, where are they online, right? What kind of time do they spend online and where do they spend that time, right? So when I'm talking about location, it doesn't only mean physical location, but also digital location as well. Now, once that you understand your customer a little bit better, there's a lot more to understand about your audience and your potential customers. But once that you have a grasp, at least a decent grasp on that, then you need to make a step forward and try to decide on what platforms are you actually gonna be present in and engage your customers with. Okay. For this, a couple of things are important when choosing the platform. There are many. Okay, that's one. You cannot be probably everywhere. Social media is resource intensive. You need to devote people, time, and essentially money to this. Otherwise, you're not going to succeed. So pick a handful first. If you're a small firm, start with one, right? But when you're picking, pick wisely, right? And prioritize. So how do you do that? One, what kind of features does that platform have, right? So if you're doing business to business, LinkedIn will be particularly appealing because it's the premier platform for that. On the other hand, if you're doing business to consumer, there are many options, and it really depends what it is that you're trying to achieve. And so you have to look at your goals again, right? If your goal is to, I don't know, make people aware that you're around, then maybe a platform like Facebook is particularly useful, right? And especially if your demographic is leaning older, right? Although, to be fair, there's plenty of young people in Facebook. It's just not as prevalent, right? So Facebook is a big enough platform that you can probably use it for many different demographics. And they have really nice micro-targeting options that will enable you to get to many younger folks, for example. Okay, good. But they do have some features that are particularly pertinent. On the other hand, if what you're trying to do is customer support, maybe Twitter has better features for that. Okay. So it depends what your goal is to start, okay, and match that to the features of the platform. The second part is also the obvious issue, which is given that you already understand a little bit your audience better, your customer or potential customers, then where are they right now? What kind of platforms do they engage in for the most part? Again, there's going to be variance in here, but if you see that most of your customers are in TikTok, then maybe you should be there, right? Because of the old uh, phrase of fish where the fish are, right? And remember, change is hard, so don't try to change your customer. Okay, good. Um, Another hint on this is look at your top competitors and see what platforms are they using. Okay, if they are smart, and most competitors are actually smart, that's why they're probably doing well, and they are probably using the right ones. Okay, so this will be kind of further validation of why those platform, it doesn't have to be more than one to start, are actually reasonable, right? And finally, one thing that you might also consider using is look at where your customers or potential customers are discussing. What are they saying right now, right? Maybe you haven't done a great job with your online presence. Maybe this is more of a serendipitous strategy, right? But it is useful to see what people are saying about your brand already, even if you're maybe not orchestrating that conversation as much as maybe you could. And where are they doing that, right? So there is software that can enable you to do this, right? And let me say a couple of things about software. There are many different tools you can use online to find out, to basically listen actively to conversations about brands. And uh, there is some free software, and free usually means in many ways less capable because a lot of the higher end capabilities are basically usually behind a paywall. There are some pieces of software that will enable you to do this in a very simplistic way. Google, for example, has a service called Google Alerts where you can be notified in your email when somebody mentions your brand, right? And you can set up some filters to make sure that you don't get too many false alerts, let's say. But it's a place where you can start. And after you see that this doesn't do everything that you want to do, then you can pay somebody to do some more active listening online for you. Good. Step 4, look at your competitors for information. And you should leverage as much information as you can. And seeing the strategies and places where your competitors are already lingering, it is a good starting point. Okay. So first, come up with a list of your top competitors. You should know this by now already, but if you haven't done this, it's always a good exercise, right? And that's the first thing. The second thing is look at their uh, social media assets, right? Where are they? What platforms are they frequenting, right? What kind of post frequency do they have, right? Are they posting something daily, weekly, bi-weekly, monthly, right? What kind of engagement levels are they getting from the different platforms, right? A lot of this stuff you can actually see. There are tools that can help you with this. Okay, here you have one picture of one of the tools that you can use. It's called SEMrush, right, from Search Engine Marketing. And again, there's a free version that gives you a little bit of information, or you can pay to get the extra information if you want to. Now, for our purposes, I'm not going to ask you guys to pay for any tools, right? But be aware that you can go into a lot of detail into the analytics side. But the kind of things that you're going to be typically tracking are things like traffic, right? You want to know how many people are going to their website or to their different social media platforms. But they're going to give you also information on things like keywords, right? So that you can know what you need to be um, bidding for. We'll talk about this later when we talk more about search engine marketing. And another thing that you can do is get information on backlinks. Okay, and some of these can actually be obtained for free. And Ahref, for example, has a free backlink assessment that it's going to tell you how many other websites are linking to your site as one of their links or references. And again, you can get more detailed information, but at least it's a start. Good. And once that you see what your competitors are up to, now you need to start thinking about what kind of content you're going to create. And remember that the content at the end of the day is the most important piece, right? I mean, yes, you want traffic, but you're not going to have consistent, loyal customers unless the value that you're delivering to them content-wise is sufficient for them to keep coming back, right? You can treat content like you treat any other product, right? The value needs to be there. So the contact is important, but the content is more important, right? Otherwise, people will bounce off your website or they will just not use your social media platforms. Okay, you will not be the point person. You will not be the thought leader, essentially, right? Now, how do you do this? Again, it depends what you're trying to achieve. So start with our first step, right? What is the goal that you're trying to get? Because different types of content are going to be basically helping you in different ways, right? So if you do a how to do something guide, right? Like let's say that you're, I don't know, a company that makes faucets, right? If you create a website that has information, like for example, some YouTube videos on how to replace your faucet, for example, at home, right? DIY video, right? And yeah, you showcase your faucet, but totally laterally, right? It's not the main focus of the video. Now, that is going to help people move through the different stages of the customer journey, but it's probably not going to be the best kind of content to close a sale, right? Maybe a post in Instagram where you clearly showcase your product and you have a link to your shop where they can directly get it is a much better type of content piece for you to close a sale instead of moving maybe from awareness to consideration, where maybe that how-to video can help much better. So the type of goal that you have is going to determine to a large degree the type of content you're going to be creating. And at the end of the day, you should have a portfolio of content, right? Right. Again, for the content, you should build the content around keywords. I think we have already emphasized this in SEO, but your content should be optimized for SEO as much as possible, right? And that doesn't mean use the same word over and over again. Get smart and get some synonyms for it and other ways of saying it, right? So that you don't repeat the same word over and over again. If you keep repeating the same word, it's going to be boring. You don't want boring if you can avoid it, right? Good. And again, when you're picking the keywords, look at the interest of your customer, right? And take the perspective of how will you find a company in this space if you didn't know anything about any brand, right? And those are the kind of keywords that you want to build around. Okay. And then finally, unfortunately or fortunately, depending on how you look at it, one thing that has happened over the last 10 years is what used to be mostly organic, like SEO was, if you were good at search engine optimization, you could build really large communities and do a really good job at generating traffic for your website. The days of just doing SEO are over at this point I think in every platform. And the reason why is because social media has become extremely competitive. Like any other market as it evolves, it becomes more competitive unless the government prevents from that competition from happening. And in this case, because of the competition, you're going to have to spend money. So you're going to have to move from SEO to SEM, search engine marketing. And you're going to have to boost your content in some way. And every platform will enable you to do this, right? But we'll discuss this in more detail in another video. Yeah. Okay. And after you have your content, which, like I said, is the most important part, and it should be built around the themes that you think are best for your audience, for your goal, and for the keywords that you are actually picking. What you need to do is decide when that content is going to be released, right? So you need to have a plan. This cannot be haphazard, or better said, if you do it, as it comes, you're probably going to get worse results than if you actually plan. Why is this important? Because frequency of posting or interaction with customers is something that most social media platforms include in their algorithm for their feeds. So if you want to be at the top of the feed, and because of that, more people are going to interact with you, more potential customers are going to see your content, you want to make sure that you're constant, or at least fairly constant, in how frequently you post. So have a plan, right? And to do this, a calendar is going to help you a lot, right? There are a couple of ways you can build your calendar. If you have low resources, you're starting right now, then just use a spreadsheet. Google Sheets are free, right? So at least mostly free, except your privacy, right? So you can actually use a tool like Google Sheets to create a calendar for yourself. Now, what kind of app site it has to do it in Google Sheets or Excel, if you have Excel, which is not free, obviously, or mostly not free. Well, the upside is cheap, and you probably know how to use Excel or Google Sheets already. The downside is that it's not purpose-built, and because of that, some of the functionality, you could build it, but it might require some programming, and not everybody knows C++, right? So instead of using that maybe do-it-yourself attitude, you might consider also using some sort of project management tool, right? That will enable you to have more functionality already built in, and maybe manage your calendar and your plan a little bit more actively, right? And there are many tools you can use for this. I strongly suggest that if you're going to use a project management tool, you actually find one that has a calendar view. It's going to help you a lot, given that you're trying to create a calendar anyway. Here you have a couple on the slide that you can use, but whatever works for you. Number two, regardless of which option you choose, you're going to have to decide on the fields that you're going to use. What kind of variables are you going to put in the calendar with information, so that basically helps you plan better? And the obvious stuff will be the title of the piece of content. You need to know what it is that you're managing, right? That's the first step. The second, who is going to be creating that, probably useful also, especially if you have a large team. If it's just a team of one, maybe it doesn't matter, right? So if you start up and you're the only person working, you don't need to have an author part, right? And number three, something that you can consider is what type of content is it, right? And again, this is not necessarily something that it's essential. However, especially if you have more than one platforms that you're posting, is what platform is it going to be posted on? And you can do some cross posting. Okay, we'll talk about this maybe at a later time. But just because you post some content in one place doesn't mean that you cannot post similar version of that content in other platforms. Okay, but you need to say where you're going to post it. Right? And then finally, what keywords are you building this content around? Okay. Now, for the last and most important piece of information that you need to have in the calendar is when and at what time that content is going to be released or distributed. Okay. Now, when I say what time, you're going to have to do some audience analysis and also look at the different social media platforms. But you're going to see that depending on who you're interested in reaching, there is going to be some times of the day where they are more active in those social media platforms. And you should be smart and use that to your advantage as much as possible. So try to post, uh, keeping a certain frequency between posts, right? So if you decide to do postings twice a week, right, that means every 3 or 4 days you will have a posting, and you should plan that in your calendar, obviously, right? And number two, post during the times where the target segment that you're more interested is most active. So you might have to do some audience research to find this out. Some tools, some platforms give you really good data on this. Others, maybe you're going to have to use third-party apps to do so. Step 7, after you have your content and a plan on when you're going to post it based on your objectives and all the research that you've done prior to this, then what you need to do is decide who's going to be doing what, right? Have a plan. Again, if it's a team of one in your basement, well, then you know who's going to be doing everything. But if you have multiple people, assign jobs to people. Have an implementation plan that says this person is going to be in charge of this platform, or this person is going to be in charge of this function, right? I mean, there are different ways of organizing work. It doesn't have to be only in one way, right? But make sure that you make an internal assessment about A, do we have the amount of resources that we need? And that means both people, money, and mostly time, right? And if you don't have the resources that you need internally, where can we get those resources externally, right? For example, you might find that you are not an expert in social media, right? So maybe you want to hire a freelancer, a contractor of some sort, or maybe a full-fledged agency that can help you with your social media deployment, right? And there are agencies that will do from beginning to end turnkey plans for you, right? And they will help you implement the plan as well. Of course, that costs money, right? So it's going to be a trade-off, right? Good. Now, another thing that you need to start thinking about, and we'll talk more about this later, is budgeting for advertising and boosting your social media content. Okay, like I was mentioning a couple of slides before, the days of only organic social media optimization are over, right? You're going to have to do some boosting of your content to make sure that it reaches as wide of an audience as possible. So you should start thinking about how much money you want to invest in this. Again, for this, it will be nice if you can do some sort of return on investment analysis, where you see, you try, in a few of the platforms to post the content and see what kind of return you're getting in terms of traffic, in terms of opens, in terms of CTAs or click-through rates. I mean, you're going to be looking at performance in different ways and figure some sort of return metric that is going to be able to compare or help you compare to some degree your impact that you're having across the different platforms, and then maybe allocate the budget in a way that prioritizes the platforms that are giving you the best return. Okay. Now, to do all this, you're going to have to become an analytics wizard, right? You're going to have to track the impact that you're having across the different platforms, right? So for that, you're going to need some software, okay? And you might need different types of software to implement the strategy, right? Like very useful software for platform management will be content scheduling that enables you to not only have a calendar, but actually do the posting for you automatically at certain times, given that you're putting the content in some sort of vault, right? So this is going to make your posting scheduling much more reliable, right? And hopefully easy as well. You might need some analytics software so that you can maybe do some of this return on investment metrics or comparisons that I was alluding to. Most of the social media platforms that have their own analytics platform, and they already have some tools that are built in there. But what a lot of people will do, especially if you are using multiple platforms, is buy some sort of third-party analytics suite that enables you to integrate all that information so that you can have a dashboard that looks across multiple platforms and gives you an idea of what's happening where, right? And that might be worthwhile, but it's expensive, right? Social listening tools, we've already talked about those. And another thing that you might want to have is some community management tools that enables your community manager, assuming you have one, or maybe you, to do a better job at getting back at people and engaging people in the different platforms. And finally, for the last step, after you've done all this, then what you need to do is implement and monitor, right? Again, we've done all the planning. We've come up, hopefully, with a great plan of what it is that we're going to do. But at the end of the day, it doesn't matter how good your plan is. If the implementation is flawed, you're not going to get anywhere. So at the end of the day, the most important thing in terms of effort, you should be spending 80% of the time implementing and maybe 10, 20% of the time planning. And if you don't plan, implementation is probably going to be poor no matter what. So plan is absolutely essential. If you don't know where you're going, every road will take you there, right? But implementation is essential. So you need to here decide, again, who's going to be doing what. When is this going to happen, right? The different activities, not only for posting content, but how are you going to achieve, like if you need to do some research a priori before you can actually make the plan, who's going to be doing that research, when is it going to get completed, right? And also you're going to have to decide what are the key metrics that you're going to be tracking for each of the different goals that you have set. So again, if you ask me, especially for a small company, you should start with one goal. Okay, maybe two if you want to be very ambitious. And for each of these goals, you should pick one or two metrics at most that are going to tell you whether you're moving in the right direction for each of these goals. Okay, and we're going to call those KPIs, right? So pick one or two metrics per goal. Okay, and then come up with a plan on how you're going to measure them and start tracking them right away, right? And here is the thing. Once that you start implementing your goal, what you need to do is keep tracking, and whenever you see a variance or a deviation between the goal and what's happening, pause and try to understand why, right? What is happening? Why am I not reaching my goal? Okay, why am I maybe moving in the wrong direction, right? If you're trying to increase awareness, you actually find awareness lowering or traffic, whatever metric it is that you're looking at, right? And then try to come up with a plan on how you're going to fix it, right? And that's all I have for you guys today.